Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's Sip and Share, to another video episode of Sip and Share. In this video series, I sit down with a tea or a coffee and I just share things about my life with you. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you saw last time Sip and Share, and I will link that in the pinned post below in the comments if you want to go watch that. It was part one of this topic that I'm talking about, which is kind of my childhood story and just things about me growing up in foster care, and I have a pretty unique childhood, so if you want to go check out part one of that, then you're welcome to, because right now I'm going to be answering more of your questions. I'm starting out with a Q&A just to kind of get this ball rolling, and if you guys have more questions, then you can post them down below, and I will continue to answer them in future videos if I feel comfortable doing so. But these were just the main questions that you guys gave me, and so currently I am just working my way through these. So without further ado, since I already did a lot of intro in the first video, so I highly recommend you go watch that one, I'm just going to start right away and start with part two. So I'm just going to read off my list. In part one, we talked about why I was placed in foster care. Did I ever get to live with my bio parents and family again? Why I don't mention my family in my videos, and how I recovered from my family's dysfunction. And so I'm just going to kick right off with the next question. Those are all some pretty heavy questions before then. So the next question I got was, were you adopted? This is a great question. And yes and no is the answer to that. So, for ease purposes, I've always told people I was adopted, and it, technically speaking, it was just legal guardianship, so sort of like adoption. It's kind of. So to talk about this question, I'm going to dive in a little bit, and I hate to get so serious in the first part of the video, but there's no really easy way around this question without kind of getting serious. And like I said a little bit in the last video, a lot of things that happened to me in my childhood are not pretty. They're not good. They're not nice. But it doesn't define who I am. It's a piece of my story. It's not all of me. And so I just hope everybody keeps that in mind. You guys have been so encouraging. You guys were all so lovely and kind in the last video when I talked about this. So I just want to kind of preface you with that, because I don't want people to think they need to feel bad for me. You're allowed to feel sad because it is a sad story, but I'm not broken because of it. You know what I mean? Alright, so enough rambling. Let's just say I was adopted, because it's kind of what it was. When I was 10, the courts were going through guardianship and deciding what they were going to do with me. I was in foster care. Anyway, I don't know what I just said, because I just realized I kind of sort of answered a question that's coming up, so I don't want to put that in, because I'll talk about that in a second. But so when I was like 10, almost 11 years old, the courts were deciding what the heck to do with me, and they were looking at family members who were maybe willing to take me. Keep in mind, I had never met anybody in my family before. I was a pretty sheltered kid with my parents, and then put into foster care, so there wasn't a lot of room for meeting family who lived all over the country. So when I was like 10 and a half, or had I just turned 10? Maybe it was closer to like recently 10. Yeah, that's right, because it was in the winter, right after my 10th birthday. I found out that I was going to be moving, and that an uncle that I had never heard of and never met, well, I'd heard of him, but I'd never met him, was going to adopt me, and I was going to be flown across the country, and I was going to go live with them forever. And that was what I was told, which was super stressful. This moment right here is when I started, this is when my anxiety really started, I think, because this is my first episode of this thing I get. I don't really get it anymore. as an adult. But whenever, like, an intense stress happens in my life, like when this happened, my body just shuts down and puts me to sleep. It's the most bizarre thing. I don't know if there's, like, a name for it. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this before, but I remember being told this. And then, like, a little bit later, just throughout the day, we were just doing normal things, and I just was, like, whoof, like, falling asleep. I couldn't. It was weird. Anyway, that's not really relevant. But, I went to go live with this aunt and uncle, and so a couple weeks later, I was packed up and put on a plane with a social worker and flown to Ontario. So I was in foster care in British Columbia, and I was flown across the country to Ontario to go live with these strangers. And so I was adopted / guardianship was gained of my uncle and aunt, who were foster parents on the side as well. Now, the reason I said this was going to get a little bit heavier is because that sounds awesome. It's like, yay, you were adopted by this family member, and it must have been really nice. And, like, that must have changed your life, or maybe, like, and it did and it didn't. It was its own struggle. It was its own thing. Obviously, moving in with a family and moving in with strangers and just being told, hey, you're flying to an entire different place and you're going to live there and you're going to never see your family again. That's a lot to take in at 10 years old. And fast forward, you know, the duration of me living there, a lot of you guys know that part of my childhood was not good either. So it was fine when it started, but then once I hit puberty, my uncle was sexually assaulting me for my entire, like, teen years, from basically as soon as I entered the teen years at, like, 12, 13, until I got the courage to leave. So, again, this is why I don't like talking about it, because I feel like it makes people so uncomfortable. But it's just a story. It's just my story. And it is what it is, you know? So that's like an entire freaking thing all on its own. But yes, I was adopted. Unfortunately, my adoptive parents, aunt and uncle, were abusive. He was sexually abusive. She was very emotionally abusive. And that's what it was. So, yeah. I hope that answers that question. That probably gave you a lot more. My next question is, what is the story of your mom and dad? Who were they? And I don't really know how to answer this one. Because I feel like I don't know where the person was coming from when they asked this. I don't know what they exactly wanted to hear. The story of my mom and dad, I don't know them as people that well. I know that my mom was a teen mom, not with me, but I have an older brother and sister, and she was a teen mom with them, and she married a man, and they lived military life, and that ended in divorce. I've been told it was an abusive relationship. I take everything I've been told with like a grain of salt, because I don't know, I have a hard time with my entire family taking anything to heart. I kind of take everything just as a story and until further information, which I don't delve this story at all though. But anyway, then my mom met my dad. I know my dad was a cook in like a men's camp. That's really all I know. I know my mom had really, really high-risk, problematic pregnancies with my brother and my sister. She went through a lot. I think she had a really hard life. She wasn't involved in her parents' life either, which is sad, but maybe not, I don't know. And then my parents met. I don't know how. My mom was told she wasn't supposed to be able to have any more kids because of how messed up everything was when she had my brother and my sister. So she had my brother and my sister at, I believe, 16 and 18. And then she went years and years without having any more children. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit of how I got my name because it kind of applies to this story. And so when she was 27, she had this dream, or like when she was like 26, she had this dream that she was going to have another baby. And she had this dream that, in her words, that God showed her this baby that she was going to have, and it was a girl, and showed her her face and showed her this new person that she was going to welcome into the world. And then she woke up, and I don't know if it was like that day or the next day or like a week later, but shortly after, she took a pregnancy test and found out she was pregnant with me. So I know that my dad had 2 other children with a previous marriage as well. I know that my dad has a lot of trauma in his life. He lost his daughter to disease, to cancer. That's really all I know on that side. Then they had me, and they weren't married. And by the way, speaking of like that little story of how they had me, and I told you I was going to tell you how I got my name. That's how I got my name, was my mom named me Rainbow because it means promise of God. And so she associated that dream with me, and she was pregnant, and it was a girl, and she said I looked just like I did in the dream she had. And so that's why she named me Rainbow. That's how I got my name. I don't really... It's hard. I don't really know much about my parents. I don't know anything about my dad's side. I don't know the most about my mom's side, but because I was adopted by an uncle, I got to meet a lot of the rest of that side of the family. I wish I knew more, because it is hard. Like, I don't have any baby pictures of myself. I have pictures from when I went into foster care, and that's it. I have no childhood photos, which is sad. It didn't bother me until I became a mom, and not having those photos to like compare or just look at is kind of crappy. But anyways, it would be really nice to know where I came from, what my heritage is, and just family history. Like, that is probably the biggest thing that bugs me about not knowing anybody on that side, or not knowing very much information. The biggest reason I talked about in the last video that I had contacted my mom again, the 2 times I contacted my mom were because I felt I had to. Was when I had Mackenzie, because I needed to know some medical information, just so I could make sure that everything was, good. I didn't know any medical history. I didn't know so many things, so I just wanted some of that, and that's how we started reconnecting. I just, turned into that. And then the second time, again, I needed more medical information about myself that I didn't have. And so I had to track my mom down and phone her, and that is how we started talking again. But again, it ended again. I had to cut it off again. And then since that, we haven't spoken at all. But yeah, I don't really know much about them, or who they were, or who they are. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question. Okay, the next question I got was, have you ever known your birth mother? Yes, I have known my birth mother. Again, I think you can gather that now. I've lived with her since from the ages of 0 to 6. And so I did know her. I did have a relationship with her. I had visitations with her until I was flown to Ontario to be adopted by my uncle. Just as is typical in foster care, you get visitation with your parents, usually on the weekends, as long as that's been court approved. This is kind of the saddest part of the whole story, is my mom has a good heart, and her and I were so close. And I've had to learn now, especially with my own daughter, that it's been a weird experience for me to have the bond that I have with my daughter that I had with my mom, but on the other side of it, and to see a little bit into what that was like for my mother and what that was like for me. For me as a parent, I think it's really helped me because I feel like I have a little bit of a better understanding of connecting with my own daughter. And on the other hand, it makes it really, really hard to understand my mother because I could never imagine doing the things that she did. And then again, on another hand, I don't know how much of it was a product of her environment, but then again, am I a product of my environment? You know what I mean? I don't know. So yeah, answering the question, I have known my birth mother. And I think that is why I tried to rekindle that relationship twice, is because, oh man, you guys, it is sad. It is sad I just want to be able to pick up the phone and call my mom when I've had a hard day. That is probably the hardest part of all of it, is that I can't just pick up the phone and call my mom. And that's what's the hardest thing for me to understand, is because we have that bond and we have that love and it was there and part of it will always be there, but like me having to separate that and realize that it takes a lot more than love to make a healthy relationship. And just because somebody loves you doesn't mean they're not toxic for you and for your family. And so that is probably the hardest part. And that's the only part I even get like the hint, even like a hint of emotion about, is that, because that's something I struggle with as an adult now. And that's something I'm struggling with as a mother, and I feel like it's harder the older my kids get. Like it's just sucky. That's just like the suckiest part about the whole thing almost, is that I just wish that she could be what I need her to be and what I wished she was for me, if that makes sense. It's a sad thing. Oh man, but I think at the end of the day it makes me a better parent. And I am blessed to have some really wonderful people in my life. And like when I met with my foster mom, my first foster mom for the first time, since seeing her when I was like 9, she tells me all the time, she reaches out and it's like, you can just call me if you need me. Like, if you just need a mom to talk to, you call me. So I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. Okay, guys, I'm going to end it there and just make a third part. If you have any more questions you want me to add to the last part of this kind of Q&A, let me know. Put them in the comments below and I will add them to my list. I've only got 3 questions left on this list, but I know that 2 of them are going to be a little bit lengthy and talky because I do want to give you guys a little bit of detail. There's just a lot of bits to my story. So I want to kind of explain as much as I can to you. So I'm going to stop it here because I just checked the footage and I know that it's already 20 minutes long of raw footage. So, yeah, I'm just going to cut it short here and we'll see you again next week. I will film for next week, I promise. And if you have any questions or any other additional questions, or if this has sparked anything you want me to address, just let me know and post it in the comments below. And if I'm comfortable doing so, I will talk about it. I'm a pretty open book. I don't really shy away from much, so you'd have to ask me a pretty weird question for me not to want to answer it. Thank you guys for listening to these and for letting me talk about them. I feel like it is healing every time I get to talk about it. And I don't talk about this very often because I don't want people to feel sorry for me. So that's usually why you don't hear me talk about it. But thank you for allowing me this space and this safety. I feel very safe to speak about it with you guys. And seeing as technically most of you are internet strangers, the fact that you've allowed me to feel safe in this space and share this with you is something really special. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful week. Let me know if this sparked any questions for you, and I will talk to you on the next Sip and Share. Love you guys. Bye.